In this video, we're talking about perfectionism, and we're going to take a look at a handful of the many lessons that I learned through experiencing it. Hi there, friends. Thanks for checking out my channel where we focus on self-improvement, productivity, and work towards becoming better versions of ourselves. Now, most people don't know this about me, but for a period of about 2 years, I experienced perfectionism on a level that I never even thought was possible. I mean, it was bordering on the level of paranoia. It was absolutely crazy. It felt like my brain was slowly being stabbed with needles. Okay, maybe not quite that dramatic, but it was really bad. Like, there would be times when I would like rub my ear because of an itch or something, and then I'd be like, oh, that wasn't quite right. I need to do it again. And I would do it for so long that I would actually draw blood like on my ear, or like scratching. Like I would scratch and like, wait, I didn't do it quite right. And like seriously, I would like draw blood, or like doing schoolwork or something. I would erase so many times that I would like wear through layers of the paper. Just crazy stuff like that. Like I couldn't do anything. It was like I was paralyzed. Like it felt like I was stuck, and like it was like I was being crippled slowly, and it was horrible. But that was a little while ago, and coming out of that, there's still some things that obviously stick with me. It doesn't completely go away. But when I spent some time reflecting on it and thinking about what it actually was like, there was a few things that came to mind, some lessons that I'm going to share with you that apply now and also would have applied then, but more importantly, they applied to me now and things that I've learned. The first lesson I learned was that perfectionism is a symptom, not necessarily a cause. Now, I know this isn't the case for every scenario, or I'm pretty sure it's not, but for mine it specifically was. And what I mean by this is that perfectionism was a sign that there was something deeper going on that I needed to address. Deeper insecurities, for example, that were surfacing and presenting themselves through perfectionism. The biggest lesson I learned through this was a lot of times whenever you're facing something that is annoying you, or like perfectionism, depression, whatever it is, a lot of times we need to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, is this the end cause in and of itself, or is this a symptom of something deeper? And especially even like with ourselves, but also when you're talking to someone else. Say you observe something in someone else, a problem or something that needs to be addressed. Make sure you ask that question before you go address it, because it could be that you're giving them, painkillers for something that is much, much deeper that needs to be taken care of. And for me, perfectionism was showing itself because of many insecurities that I had in who I was, a lot of what other people thought about me and how I was perceived. And that then translated into how I perceived myself. I would see myself through other people's eyes, or what I thought they were seeing me as. And by not necessarily addressing those things, and by addressing just perfectionism, like I did, unfortunately, those insecurities then translate and present themselves in other areas of my life. And so it comes back to, again, that kind of root problem of addressing the symptom and not the cause. Basically, my mind was just trying to get my attention, saying, hey, you need to deal with this. Lesson number 2, progress always beats perfection. I have a seriously bad tendency to sit on the sidelines and research and observe and study and plan everything out before I even set foot on the court. Planning is important, but when it cripples you from actually stepping out there and taking action, it can be very unhealthy. And probably the best place I learned this was from daily vlogging. Most of you might not know, but I created daily vlogs every single day for just over 100 days without missing a day. It was pretty insane. Sometimes I'm still amazed that I was able to do that while working a full-time job. Yeah, kind of crazy. I went from like one video a month or every 2 weeks or so to like bam, every single day. And it really reinforced in my mind, like, I can sit and plan and think and work on a video for a month. But instead of doing that for one whole month and making the perfect video, I would learn so much more by sitting down and grinding through 10, 20, 30 videos and just doing it. And learning from experience. And so learning that lesson has helped me find kind of that sweet spot of what my timeline is to create the best video that I can in the amount of time that I give myself. Lesson number 3, the spotlight effect. Oh, I love this one. This applies to so many areas of life. And basically the spotlight effect is kind of like a psychological misinterpretation of your life, where you think that you're always under some sort of beam or spotlight where everything you do is lit up and everyone else is watching you because you have a spotlight on you, or that you're under a magnifying glass and the smallest things you do are blown up for other people to see. And what I learned from this is, 1, it's not true. And 2, people are just so concerned with themselves and thinking that they're under their own spotlight that they don't even notice you a lot of times. I mean, you could have egg on your face for half the day and most people wouldn't even realize it. And let's say that someone does make a really big deal out of something small that you do, or that someone that wants you to be perfect. For me, it's really hard not to feel empathy for that person, because them lashing out at you and criticizing you for whatever you did wrong is oftentimes a tiny little glimpse or percentage of how they actually internally treat themselves. And usually those people can only find relief from their own torment and criticism by pointing out other people's failures and mistakes. Thinking about it in that light, it's really, really hard not to feel sorry for these people and not to feel empathy towards them and not to respond with kindness and acceptance towards them, because that's ultimately what they need. If you retaliate and point out their failures, it's just gonna make them dogmatic and angry and resentful, and they're gonna fight back at you. Lesson number 4, perfectionism is not a curse. I know it can feel like you're kind of a slave to it at times and that it's just beating you over the head all the time, but it's actually not something that should be shunned or should be strangled in dramatic fashion. It's something that is actually very important, and we need to learn how to harness it and use it properly. Just like emotions, we can learn how to use, anger, fear, courage, whatever, for motivation to push us forward. Everybody has a little piece of perfectionism inside of them, some more than others, but it's very, very important that we have this. Like, we're designed and created with this. I mean, without it, life would be almost unbearable and innovation would be almost non-existent. It was very important for me to get a hold of this because it then shifted the focus off of me and like, oh, I'm the problem, I'm the person who's terrible and awful, to like, okay, no, I'm actually the person that's responsible to take this and harness it and to learn how to use it properly. And it put the focus on my action and my reaction to it versus just condemning all of me, saying I'm horrible, I'm terrible because I have this condition or whatever, this OCD. Lesson number 5, mind over matter. Now this one's really, really interesting because this is basically how I beat perfectionism, or not beat, but like subdued it to a way that I could then use it properly. Basically what I had to do was I had to force myself to be imperfect. I would do this usually when I was alone at first, and I would purposefully do something that would drive me crazy. I mean, just on the edge, just a little subtle thing that I knew I could do right, but I did it wrong on purpose. And it basically was forcing myself to live with my imperfections. For like 2 years, I had to force myself only with mind over matter to be imperfect. And that's eventually how I subdued this. And the really cool thing is that it actually holds true still now. That mind over matter training that I learned created discipline in my mind to be able to make those cognitive decisions in the face of danger or fear or really high stress situations. I've found that I've had a higher tolerance to be able to look at things rationally and to make a conscious choice and decision in doing some of those things. There's a few examples of this. Like, for one, when I was like 15, we did a cliff jump at a camp I was at, and like, you had to do it, and it was basically the same thing. It's just mind over matter. It was just a conscious choice. I was like, okay, this is gonna terrify me, it's really scary, but I'm gonna do it. And so I just jumped right off. And it was a very cool feeling because it was like, whoa, like, here was this petrifying fear from 30 feet up in the air and water that I'd never done this before, but I was able to do it simply by telling my mind, do this. And I could make myself do it. And that's presented itself in other areas too, where, a car crash or, a friend having a very close death experience, where it's just like, your mind feels like it just wants to fry, and you just want to enter into that panic mode of like, this can't be happening, your heart starts racing. And I found, like, in those moments, I can make a conscious choice to be like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And obviously I'm not perfect at this, like, of course not. There are scenarios where I have absolutely lost it. Like, for example, one time I almost drowned and completely lost it, like absolutely no control. My mind entered panic mode and there was nothing I could do about it. Made a whole video on that, actually. You should watch it, it's very interesting. So obviously I can still get better in this area. I'm not perfect, and I want to get better because having that ability is incredibly powerful and important. But like I said, this is something that helped build a higher tolerance in the moments of high stress and whatnot, to be able to make conscious decisions. Now, before I give you the next tip, I just want to take a second to say thank you for clicking on this video. It's really, really awesome that you're here, and it's so cool to see you guys support me in whatever ways that you decide to do it. Whether that's through a like or a comment, maybe a subscription, it's just so cool, and I really, really appreciate it. So I would be completely remiss if I didn't take a second to say thank you. Lesson number 6. Perfectionism is a powerful motivator. Now, this is something that I just only recently discovered about perfectionism that had been kind of lying dormant in me for a long time. So let me kind of flesh this out real quick. The way I use this is, like I said, I never got rid of my perfectionism. It's still deep down inside, and I can choose to use it when I want to. Take this video, for example. When I sit down and edit this, one of the ways that I can motivate myself to blast through it, I can release that perfectionism inside of me again, where I'm like, I'm going to make this the best, most polished, most amazing video. Peter McKinnon's gonna cry when he watches this thing. It's gonna be insanely awesome. And then I'll basically just turn that side of me loose, and I just like plow through this footage and just rip through it, because I'm like, I have that vision. I'm gonna make it perfect. And so the first, run throughs, I'm like lightning quick. And then the key is to stop yourself right before it begins to get a little too obnoxious. Right when I'm obsessing over something, then I'll kind of hone it back and like, okay, let's back out of this a little bit. Let's enter the normal state. And then I can kind of pack it away and remind myself, hey, you know what? It's not gonna be absolutely perfect. Thanks for the motivation, but we're gonna just post this the way it is. That one's really, really interesting. I've only recently discovered that. And it's kind of fun to use sometimes, and I didn't even know I was using it for a long time. Lastly, we have lesson number 7, which is I define perfection. Now, this one is really, really important, and it might be the most important for me personally. This came to me from Jocko Willink, who talks about extreme ownership, where he says that you are responsible for everything that happens to you. Everything. And I never quite understood it until I read Mark Manson, who kind of expounds on it a little bit more. And he says that it's not our fault when something happens. Fault is in the past, responsibility is in the present. And it's our responsibility to interpret the events of whatever happens to us or whatever we do. And so then it is my responsibility to interpret perfectionism for myself and not let it be defined by someone else. In the past, I've made videos where when I finished the video, I finished it and I said, that is perfect. That is the best video that I could make with my skill right now, with the amount of time that I was given and with the equipment that I had. That is perfect. When you learn to take this kind of responsibility, it can be tremendously helpful. Now, this doesn't mean that you trick yourself into living in disillusionment or thinking that everything's perfect and trying to trick yourself into thinking this. That's not what this means. It's more of a state of being okay with a lesser perfect. Because in reality, there's not a whole lot that is perfect by everyone's standards. We all kind of do this already, where, we'll say, wow, that was the perfect golf swing. I mean, it just felt so good the whole way through, right? Was it actually perfect? Well, maybe by, professional golf standards, no, it was not. But could it be perfect for your standard? Absolutely it can. Or at least it can be really, 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 really close. I would be fascinated to hear your responses to what I covered and whether or not you've experienced them or anything that you disagree with, especially the last one. That one can be a little controversial. So if you have any bones to pick, feel free to do that in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Now, there's a high probability that when you were watching this, you thought of someone else that could benefit from hearing these tips. If that's the case, I would really encourage you to share this video with them. If they choose not to watch it or they don't want to be interested in it, that's totally fine. That's on them. It's not on you. But it's worse yet if they never have the option to hear. So with that being said, as always, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next video.